My main objective during my trip to Japan was to buy a lot of games, and I certainly think I accomplished that. Here's a rundown of all the games I bought. First up, in no particular order, the Famicom games. Sweet Home, the horror role-playing game that was the inspiration for Resident Evil. Paman, a platforming game with a Konami Man-looking character that punches people. Mappy Kids, starring a mouse that kicks other animals. Parasol Henby, a platformer starring some guy who attacks with rainbows, sort of like in Rainbow Island's Bubble Bobble. Gorby no Pipeline Daisakusen, a puzzle game slightly similar to Pipe Dream starring Mikhail Gorbachev. Double Dragon 2 The Revenge, classic beat 'em up. Tiny Toon Adventures, a platformer that clearly borrowed from Super Mario Bros. 3. Cosmic Epsilon, a shooting game similar to Space Harrier. I need the Famicom 3D glasses to fully experience this one. Mugen Senshi Valis. I've owned this one before but sold it. Maybe this time I'll try harder. Wario's Woods, a unique puzzle game that I first played on the Wii Virtual Console. Unfortunately, the music isn't the same as in the European version. Contra, the quintessential action platformer. The Japanese version is superior too. It has a nice animated title screen, a Ghosts and Goblins style map screen, and animated graphics in the levels. Utsurun des, and even by Japanese standards, very weird game, starring something. I like the music. Ninja Gaiden 2, classic but super hard action platformer. Guevara, or Guerrilla War as it's known over here, what Ikari Warriors should have been. The cool thing is that in this Japanese version it explicitly says that you're playing as Che Guevara and Fidel Castro for the second player. Jackie Chan's Action Kung Fu is a fun little beat-em-up like platformer. Sayuki World 2, known in America as Wampum. The Japanese version is yet another take on the Journey to the West tale as far as I can tell. It's in one of those Jalico style big cartridges. Takeshi no Shosenjou, legendary bad game. Apparently Beat Takeshi gave his suggestions to what the game should contain while out drunk with the game's development team. As a result, you can punch your boss, divorce your wife, sing karaoke, leave a map in the sun for an hour, hang glide to a tropical island to find a lost treasure. Juju Densetsu, otherwise known as Toki, is a platformer starring a spitting monkey. Being able to shoot in all directions is useful and not too often seen in NES games, honestly. Kuryu Sentai Juranger, maybe. Basically a Power Rangers game. It has big sprites. That's basically all I have to say at this point. Kaiketsu Yanshamaru 2, a ninja game starring some kid who twirls his sword instead of swinging it. New York Yankees. What a great title. Otherwise known as Rockin' Cats and made by Atlas. A game with a spring-mounted boxing glove as a weapon that could also latch onto stuff and swing around, sort of like Bionic Commando. Argos no Senshi, better known as Rygar, is an action platformer by Tecmo starring a guy with a round shield he shoots kind of like Captain America. The downside to the Japanese version is that they switch songs on the first stage. I much prefer the Superman-like theme of the European and American versions. The timeless and classic Tetris, although this Famicom version is not that great. You press A to make the blocks fall down immediately, and you press up to rotate them. The control is worse than the CDI version. Still, it was cheap. Kame no Ongaishi, otherwise known as Sexes, is a platformer and 2D shooter hybrid. The control isn't great, and I'm not a big fan of 2D shooters, but I'll give it a try. Little Nemo the Dream Master, an often forgotten Capcom game based on the movie that was based on the old comic strip. It's a platformer with suits and stuff. Looks good. Remember the NES launch game Kung Fu? Well, Spartan X2 is the sequel. It's basically the same game with much better graphics. This was the only game I bought that was in the glass case at Super Potato. Salamander, otherwise known as Life Force. This is a 2D shooter, one of my least favorite genres, but I just had to have this one because of the extremely sexy cartridge. Chip 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 and Dale, Rescue Rangers. Most people know about this one, and they should, because it's good. Yoshi no Tamago, otherwise only known as Yoshi, was the cheapest game I bought. To be honest, I picked it up thinking it was Yoshi's Cookie, and now I regret it a little. But hey, it was very, very cheap. Kero Kero Keropi 2 is a platformer starring a frog which yells at its enemies, sort of like in the Waganland games. Ninja Crusaders is a ninja action platformer with annoying one-hit deaths and respawning enemies, but still it manages to be an enjoyable little game. I actually already beat this one in 2-player mode with a friend. We spent something like 2 hours on the final stage alone. The only Famicom Disk System game I bought, Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link. It's not available on cartridge in Japan, like Metroid and Kid Icarus. Zelda 1 is though, with the highly imaginative title of Zelda 1. Finally, I bought a Joy Card, a controller made by Hudson that has turbo. It's also slightly larger than the regular Famicom controllers, which I thought was a welcome thing. On to the Super Famicom games. Donkey Kong Country, an overrated game in my opinion, but I wanted to give it another shot. Plus, it was laughably cheap. Mickey Mouse in Tokyo Disneyland was just as cheap as DKC, but also complete in the box. A methodical platformer, but it seems good. The Mario Paint box, to my surprise, didn't actually contain the game, so I had to order the game later when I got home. Mega Man 7. I have to have all the Mega Man games, which is proven by the fact that I bought Mega Man Soccer, which is not a very good game really. Sho Makaimura, aka Super Ghouls and Ghosts. Even though these games are insanely hard, I like them. The best one is on the Mega Drive, but this one is good too. Sparkster, a sequel or remake to Rocket Knight Adventures on Mega Drive. I'm not sure which, but in any case this is a good game. Donkey Kong Country 3 didn't work. I'm not sure if it's damaged or if it's a pirate cartridge of some kind, but all I got when starting the game up was a screen telling me that it's illegal to copy games. Street Fighter 2 Turbo. I'm not crazy about Street Fighter games really, but this still seemed like something I should own. F-Zero, the Super Nintendo launch game. The back of the cartridge is pretty yellow, but honestly when I was in the store I didn't check. I guess I was blinded by the low price. Sword Maniac, otherwise known as Excalibur 2097, is an action game starring some 90s looking guy with a sword. Yoshi's Island, a great Mario game starring Yoshi. This one I got complete in the box, and what a nice box it is. Final Fantasy VI. This one I already had, modified with English text even, but I've always wanted to have the box and manual. Yoshi no Road Hunting, otherwise known as Yoshi Safari, is Nintendo's only first-person shooter, although you could also call it a rail shooter or light gun game. It has to be played with a Super Scope, which I don't own yet. Super Metroid, another classic Nintendo game. This Japanese version has an option for English text. Sure, there's not a lot of text in Metroid games, but it's still a great feature. Another difference is the moonwalk option, that allows Samus to shoot continually while walking backward. Rockman and Forte, the Super Nintendo game that looks like a PlayStation game, namely Mega Man 8. But this game also has bass playable, and no goddamn jet ski level. This game was informally considered as Mega Man 9 for a long time, until Mega Man 9 was actually made. Kirby's Dream Land 3. Unlike Kirby Superstar, this game isn't split up into 3, and there are no minigames. Just a pure Kirby game. The graphical style is very nice looking, and overall it's just a good game. Super Castlevania 4. Definitely one of the best Castlevania games, defined by the ability to whip in any direction. Hamel no Violin Hiki. A very interesting platformer by Enix, apparently based on an anime. The main character attacks by playing a violin, and can use the girl following him around to help him out. Assault Suits Valken, otherwise known as Cybernator, reminds me of Gundam, but unlike most Gundam games, there's no turn-based strategy here, only hot-blooded action. Demon's Blazion, otherwise known as Demon's Crest, is the third Gargoyle's Quest game, and damn, I think it has one of the coolest title screens ever in a video game. Now for a handful of Game Boy games. Contra, slightly based on Super C, but overall I think it feels like a new game. I have to admit I looked at this cartridge and guessed it was the beach volleyball game, the only Kunio Game Boy game that's not an NES port, but unfortunately what I got was the Game Boy version of Crash and the Boys Street Challenge, which is my least favorite Kunio game. Castlevania Legends, in my opinion the best of the 3 Game Boy Castlevania games. It was retconned along with a bunch of other games in 2001 with the release of Harmony of Dissonance. Too bad, as this one starred a woman for once, Sonia Belmont. Kirby Tilt and Tumble, a Game Boy Color game with a motion thingy built in. It's meant to be held flat and then tilted to roll Kirby into holes. A fun little game, but unfortunately right now I don't have a Game Boy Color or Game Boy Advance. Which means that I can't play this game right now either. Sawaru Made in Wario, aka WarioWare Twisted. In my opinion, this is the best WarioWare game. It's played by rotating the GBA, and it also has a rumble pack built in. I only bought one console, a Sega Saturn. In Japan they only have it in grey and white, and I think the white looks much nicer. Although it's hard to find a white Sega Saturn. It's usually yellow. I did find one mostly white one though, but like a dumbass I broke it as soon as I got home. I plugged it in and turned it on, forgetting that we use 240 volts here in Sweden, and the Saturn being from Japan only wants 100. I'm looking into getting it repaired now. But I bought a few Saturn games in any case. Biohazard, aka Resident Evil. Apparently the Saturn version has a battle mode, and also it was cheap. Street Fighter Real Battle on Film, colloquially known as Street Fighter the Movie the Game, is of course Street Fighter with digitized actors from the lame but endearing 1995 Hollywood movie Clockwork Knight, featuring the original Keyblade, a 2.5D platformer with a knight fighting toys with a distinct Toy Story vibe to it. Now some miscellaneous stuff. I got Kokobo Collection for PlayStation, which turned out to be Kokobo Racing, the Mario Kart clone with some great arrangements of classic Final Fantasy music, and then two games I didn't know existed, Kokobo Dice and Kokobo Breeder. I think the Breeder game is based on the Kokobo breeding in Final Fantasy VII. I got a Game & Watch, Ball, but I found out when I got home that it's not an original from the early 80s, but a replica made for Club Nintendo much later. But still, I've never had a Game & Watch before, so it's cool. I got a Bowser figure, and I bought a Mario Kart car at the airport souvenir shop. At Super Potato I bought a Protoman keychain, or maybe it's a cell phone thing, but I don't care. Well, that is all. I spent this much on video games in Japan. It was very awesome being there with a lot of money saved up. Like a kid in a candy store, but actually allowed to buy anything I wanted.